Okay. All right, so what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to provide a brief overview of the RCCP and where we're at today. And then I'll go through phases 1 and 2 and our new pilot project of incorporating resiliency into CAMA land use plan updates. So I'll go through that process. And then I'm going to pass it over to Kason, and he's going to go over phases 3 and 4, those application requirements, and then we'll have time for questions. So a little bit about the RCCP. I think a lot of you guys online have heard about this program, but just to give you some background on how it was started. It's kind of been a long time coming. The foundation of the program was laid in 2016 through a pilot program where 5 communities kind of went through a similar process of identifying vulnerabilities and assets and then kind of coming up with a list of projects aimed at reducing their risk to those vulnerabilities. And with that pilot project came a lot of good outcomes. So communities had a better understanding of what resilience meant, what their vulnerabilities were, and what kind of grant funding is available for resilience projects. But then Hurricane Florence happened, as we all know, and so Executive Order 80 came out through Governor Cooper, which called for the state's first climate risk assessment and resilience plan. And within that plan led to, a couple workshops, which eventually led to the creation of the Resilient Coastal Communities Program. And we were able to create that framework through appropriations through the General Assembly, as well as our first National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant, which we were able to kind of start, phases 1 through 4 and lay that framework out. And our eligible communities are all municipal and county governments within the 20 coastal CAMA counties. See the next slide. Okay, so at its core, the RCCP is designed to address barriers to coastal resilience at the local level. We want to assist communities with risk and vulnerability assessments and develop portfolios of well-planned and prioritized projects, and then advance those projects to shovel-ready status, which means they're ready for permits and construction. And then finally, linking communities to funding streams for project implementation, even if it's not through the RCCP. Our program runs in 4 phases. So we're going to go through all 4 today, but just a brief outline here. Phases 1 and 2 run concurrently. Phase 1 includes developing a community action team, engaging with the public, and performing a risk and vulnerability assessment. Phase 2 is a community and data-driven process to identify priority actions that can be taken to adapt to short and long-term hazards. So basically developing your project portfolio. Once you've gone through those 2 phases, you're eligible for phase 3 funding, which is the engineering, design, and permitting of a prioritized resilience project. And then once you have all those design plans, you're ready for phase 4 funding, which is the implementation or construction of that project. To date, we have received approximately $12.5 million from the General Assembly and $6.7 million from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grants. We've also received a little bit from NOAA's CZMA and a little bit from HUD at the very beginning of the program. And one of the really wonderful things about our funding is it's been growing. We've seen increasing support for the program, which means we'll be able to hopefully support more and more communities as the years go on. And this growing support from the General Assembly has meant that we can leverage these state appropriations for federal grants. So it's how we've been able to bring in now 4 National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grants to kind of supplement the 4 phases. And then most recently, I don't know if many of you have seen in the news, the RCCP did make it in the governor's budget. So looks like right now approximately $2 million and then another permanent position, because as of right now, I'm the only permanent employee. So program accomplishments, where we're at as of today, there's been approximately $1.87 million awarded to phases 1 and 2. Ooh, see, I hear some feedback. Okay, there we go. That's been distributed over 41 coastal communities. And then there's been the biggest chunk has been 5.4 million has been awarded through phase 3 for approximately 35 top priority resilience projects. And then finally, there's been 3.15 million awarded to implement 10 shovel-ready projects that include nature-based components. So that's through phase 4. And here's a map showing of the communities that have participated so far. We've had, like I said, 41 communities participate through phases 1 and 2. We've had over 200 resilience projects identified and prioritized through their project portfolios. We've had at least 300 people engaged within coastal resilience. There are 20 completed engineering and design projects so far, and then we have 3 out of the 10 have completed their construction projects, just to kind of give everyone a sense of where we're at. All right, so now I'm going to go into the process for phases 1 and 2 and the CAMA land use planning portion. All applications, so for phases 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, they're all due to us by April 25th by 5 p.m. to rccp@deq.nc.gov. So as I mentioned earlier, eligible communities. So it's going to be any county and municipal government within our 20 CAMA counties here shown on the map. And then we also are taking applications from any federal or state recognized tribes. So phase 1 includes 6 steps. Uh, the first step is to develop an inclusive and diverse community action team whose role is to actively participate in and inform the process, and then kind of champion the effort for each participating community. It's kind of like a stakeholder engagement group. The second step is to set the visions and goals. Specific measurable goals will help the community identify steps that can be taken to achieve their mission. The third step is to review existing local plans and efforts. We want to promote integration throughout this process as much as possible. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The fourth step is to develop a community engagement strategy. So we kind of want to see how you're planning to engage with your community, and it really differs from community to community. And the fifth step will be mapping your critical assets. So like your roads, your hospitals, schools, as well as your natural infrastructure. So any wetlands, rivers, and then your community action team will select which one of those to be included within the risk and vulnerability assessment, which is your very last step. You'll be evaluating the risk to your community's vulnerable populations, as well as your critical assets from a number of hazards. So we have you look at flooding, specifically rainfall, tidal, and riverine. You'll be looking at storm surge, sea level rise, and then any other relevant hazards that you have. So we've seen a lot of communities look at wind, erosion, and then we've had a couple recently look at wildfire. So you can look at that within your vulnerability assessment as well. Once you do all that, you'll move into phase 2. This phase includes project identification and prioritization. So you're going to develop a portfolio alongside your contractor with resilience projects and actions aimed at reducing exposure and sensitivity to the hazards you identified. And then you're going to consolidate at least 5 priority projects into your project portfolio. And what we've seen is this really is a living document that we want you guys to be able to pull and extract from, and go after other grant opportunities, because this will all be put together with the aid of your contractor, and you can go in and change it over time, or check off when a project was implemented, kind of help you keep track of next steps. So we wrote a program planning handbook to provide guidance to communities and contractors for completing phases 1 and 2. The program steps I just went through are outlined in more detail in this handbook. There's important existing data, tools, and resources incorporated throughout. The handbook can also help communities that want to complete phases 1 and 2 themselves to prepare them to be eligible for phase 3 and 4 funding. And most recently, Kason did a great job updating the technical appendix. So we had to go through and kind of fix a lot of the links and resources that are no longer available. So now there'll be a brand new technical appendix with new resources, and then some templates and examples from previous rounds, so you can see what some other communities have done. All right, so getting into the community selection, we will be reviewing applications and selecting applicants based kind of on the following criteria. So we're going to be looking at the level of risk exposure to your critical assets and your natural infrastructure, and then what kind of socially vulnerable populations are at risk. We're going to be looking at the impact of coastal hazards, your internal capacity. We really want to help those communities that are down on staff and funding. And then finally, looking at your level of current momentum and resilience planning. So have you done any of this work before? Do you need a lot of help with this? Kind of what's been done? So this is a very interesting part about the RCCP. For contracting, our office will be contracting directly with third-party contractors to assist communities in completing phases 1 and 2. So communities will apply to us to receive that direct technical assistance, and then contractors at the same time will be applying to provide that technical assistance. And then we're going to match successful applicants with competitively selected contractors to do that work. So it takes the procurement burden off of local governments and county governments, which we heard has been a big headache relief. It's because I know I used to work in local planning, and procurement can be a big headache. So that's how that process is going to work. And if there's a contractor or firm that you know of that you want to work with, you just need to let us know in the application, and then make sure that that firm also applies for phases 1 and 2. And what we're looking at right now is applications being due April 25th. We're going to need a couple weeks to work through those and make selections. So hoping that uh, the contract period would begin in June of 2025. And this time it will be a 12-month contract period. We have been operating at 9 months, and I think we've just realized folks need a little bit more time to get all this work done. And we do offer contract extensions, no cost. But this round of phases 1 and 2 is funded through a National Fish and Wildlife grant. So we've got deadlines on our end, but we will be able to probably do 6 months to a year contract extensions, but we can get more into that later. So available funding, as I said, we've got almost $2 million available for this round of phases 1 and 2. And we're hoping to support up to 20 communities. We're going to allocate funding based on the demand, need, and geographic scope. So an anticipated range for awards is going to be anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000. And as I mentioned, this money is awarded to the community, but we're going to be using it to pay the contractor. So there won't be any exchange of funds between us and the community. There's no cash or in-kind match requirement for any of these phases. And then as I mentioned, it's a 12-month contract period. All right, so eligible contractors who can provide this technical assistance. So we're looking for any kind of private planning or engineering firms, any councils of government, any NGOs, or any academic institutions. Multiple organizations can partner on one application. We've seen a very successful partnership between a contractor and a COG before. So if it's easier to just go in on an application together, we're all for that. And then same with the contractors. If you guys have specific communities you've reached out to and you've had conversations with, just mark that on the application, and then make sure that that community also has submitted their application. And then finally, one of the most important things is, there's a question on there where we're going to ask you the maximum number of communities that you can work with. That kind of helps us with the matching process. So when selecting contractors, what we're going to be looking for is your experience in resilience planning and working group facilitation at a local government level, your experience with risk and vulnerability assessments. We're really looking for some unique community engagement and outreach ideas, as well as using GIS and mapping critical assets, as well as experience with nature-based solutions, analyzing coastal hazards and future conditions, your internal capacity. Do you have the staff at your firm to get through phases 1 and 2? And then your ability to ensure cost effectiveness. So within that price range, do you think that this is something you guys could handle? So final deliverables at the end of phases 1 and 2, this is what the contractors are going to be working with their communities on. So at the end of this process, the goal is to have two major components. So first is going to be this risk and vulnerability assessment report. And then the second piece is going to be that project portfolio. And all of this will be outlined in a contract and things like that. But just for communities to get understanding of what you're going to get out of this, it's going to be a resilience strategy is what we call it, where the risk and vulnerability assessment will be in there, your community engagement strategy, your maps, GIS data, and then your project portfolio that you can use and go after implementation funds for. All right, so now switching into the CAMA land use plans, that was all phases 1 and 2. And now we are piloting this brand new idea and we're going to see how it goes. Um, as most of you know, CAMA land use plans are required within the 20 coastal CAMA counties. So what we're planning to do this time is start breaking down some of these silos, even internally, where we have, this planning program within the Division of Coastal Management, and then we've got the RCCP, where there's a lot of overlap that we've seen. So what we're going to start doing is incorporating resiliency into CAMA land use plans updates. And this was the funding that we received through National Fish and Wildlife. So selected communities are going to be able to update their CAMA land use plan, but to ensure that resilience is meaningfully incorporated in your land use planning efforts. So this work can be conducted alongside phases 1 and 2 for new communities. If you have not participated, you can do both at the same time. Or if you've already done phases 1 and 2, you can still apply for this CAMA land use plan money. And there's a whole process we'll work with you on incorporating your existing resilience strategy into that land use plan. So out of that 2 million, we have about 540,000 available to fund updates to these CAMA land use plans in probably approximately 3 communities. So it's going to be highly competitive, but we're going to be looking based on demand, your need, and geographic scope. So we'll really be looking at those plans that haven't been updated in at least 10 years. Areas, communities with low capacity that otherwise wouldn't be able to get these plans updated. So the process, what's this going to look like? So to incorporate resiliency into your land use plans, we're asking communities to use the Plan Integration for Resilience scorecard. And if either Kason or Rachel can put that link in the chat, I'd appreciate it. But it's an existing method or tool that evaluates land use policies and addresses existing vulnerabilities. Because when we were thinking about this, we were like, what's already out there, what's been done, and what's worked. So this has worked for the city of Washington and North Carolina. They were one of the pilot communities for this integration card. So the intended outcomes here is to get a deeper understanding of the benefits of land use planning, get increased awareness of how land use plans influence vulnerability, and then adjust your plans and policies to improve integration and enhance community resilience. So the scorecard is very interesting. It follows a 3-phase process. So you'll be incorporating physical and social vulnerabilities that you identify in phase 1 of the RCCP. And then the results along with the community's resilience strategy will be integrated into your land use plan through resilience-focused policies. So I'm going to go more into that. So here, as most of you know, the land use plan has to comply with General Statute 113A-110, which is the Coastal Area Management Act, as well as the Coastal Resources Commission's planning rules, which are under 15A and CAC 07B. So you've got to meet those requirements. And then what's new and what we're piloting is to include at least 2 resilience policies per CAMA management topic. And as you remember, those topics are public access, land use compatibility, infrastructure carrying capacity, natural hazard areas, and water quality. So for example, under public access, your plan needs to include at least 2 resilience-related policies for public access. So at a minimum, the plan needs to contain 10 policies that enhance resilience to coastal hazards. So final deliverables for this section of the land use plan. We're going to be looking for a draft land use or comprehensive plan that meets the outlined planned criteria and is ready for submission to our office for review as part of the CRC's land use plan certification process. Our district planners will review the submitted plans for consistency with the criteria outlined before and then in compliance with CRC's planning rules. Local governments and your contractor are responsible for incorporating those revisions in response to DCM's review, and then making sure the plan gets adopted and submitting for state certification. So the submission of incomplete plans will result in a reduced grant award, and then additionally, failure to adopt a plan locally or obtain state certification may impact your local government's ability to receive future funding. And contracting for this is the same as phases 1 and 2. We'll be contracting directly with a third-party contractor to assist communities in completing this work. We'll be matching successful applicants with your contractor. And as I mentioned, just make sure to note if you have one in mind you'd already like to work with. And the contract period is the same for phases 1 and 2. It's 12 months starting in June, and we will offer no cost extensions if needed. So in summary for phases 1 and 2 and your CAMA land use plans, all applications are due by 5 p.m. on April 25th. You need to email your application and your cover sheet to rccp@deq.nc.gov. We will be reviewing the applications based on the criteria I mentioned. The contract period will be 12 months. If you're selected, we will hold an in-depth orientation for all selected communities and contractors where we'll really go more into detail of the work that needs to get done. And then finally, we are available to assist communities in preparing your application. If you have any questions, that's what we're here for. We want the application process to be very easy because we know there's a lot out there that are pretty intense, and that's not what we want to do here. So if you have any questions or need any help, don't hesitate reaching out to us. And then with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Kaysen to go over phases 3 and 4.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. That was great. And thank you all for being here today. Again, my name is Kaysen Wally. I'm the Coastal Resilience Specialist here at the division. I'm going to cover phases 3 and 4, so that's the engineering and design and implementation phases of the RCCP. Some of this information might be a little bit repetitive between these two phases, but just hang in there with us. There are some critical differences. And again, like Mackenzie mentioned, all of these applications are going to be due at the same time. So as it was saying on the previous page, that's April 25th by 5 p.m. So eligibility for phase 3, that's going to be all county and municipal governments within the 20 coastal CAMA counties, as well as any federal or state recognized tribes. In this case, you'll need to have completed phases 1 and 2 of the RCCP, so those planning phases we just went over, or an equivalent scope of work. We know there are some communities that are working on similar resilience initiatives, and if you've done so and completed work that satisfies the requirements of phases 1 and 2, it is possible to skip over those phases and pick up with the RCCP in phases 3 and 4. You can submit a joint application for a regional grant if there's adjacent communities that are interested in working together and coordinating. And you also may submit applications for more than one project, but if you do so, be sure to indicate your funding priority. So which of those projects is the one that you would most like to see funded if we were to move forward. So projects include requests for the engineering and design of a priority resilience project identified by the applicant, and proposals for the development of ordinances or policies to further resiliency in the community may also be submitted for consideration. So some of those planning and policy projects are available to you as well. Next slide, please, Mackenzie. So for phase 3, this is going to be a 12-month project period. So anticipated to be June 2025 to June 2026. As with the other phases, there is no cash match or in-kind match requirement. And this time around, we're anticipating awards to range from $25,000 to $750,000 for phase 3, depending on what kind of project you're submitting. But we do have $6 million available split between phases 3 and 4. And how that gets divvied up will depend a little bit on just, the amount of projects or applications rather that we receive. And so then we'll kind of work out how to distribute that funding. Next slide. So the selection criteria and prioritization of applications for phase 3. I know this is a little bit of a text wall for you guys, but here are the key factors. So the first is whether the applicant has completed phases 1 and 2 of the RCCP or an equivalent scope of work. We'll go into in just a moment how to submit that equivalent scope of work if you are going to be operating or submitting an application on that track. How the project helps to advance the RCCP's goals. How well the project fits into the community's resilience project or resilience strategies. So Is it aligned with the vision and goals, for example, that are developed during that process of the community? And was it specifically identified in the resilience strategy, or is this a new project that's been, sort of identified after the fact? Those are all things we want to know. Let's see, whether it results in ready-to-build engineering and design plans, or a completed ordinance or policy. If it includes nature-based solutions, how well it addresses the needs of underserved and historically disadvantaged communities, whether other coastal communities can use a similar approach. So is this transferable to other communities? The availability of additional funds required to complete the project if necessary. So what we mean by that is that if this project is a component of a larger joint effort, or if this is a project intended to be done in phases, we want to know how this funding fits into that broader context. So the next is the scale of expected benefits from the project, whether the project is cost effective, and then finally, if it complies with CAMA regulations, including the necessary permits, permits and approvals. So even though this is just the engineering and design phase, we want to go ahead and be looking at if this is to move to implementation, are there going to be any roadblocks with permitting that we need to address now, maybe redefine the scope, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So here are just a few examples of potential projects. This is not an exhaustive list, but you could focus on things like living shorelines, coastal habitat restoration, so things like salt marshes. We don't have many mangroves in North Carolina, but lots of wetland habitat, riverine and stream habitat, greenways or wetland restoration, stormwater parks, so things like rain gardens and bioswales. But there's also that planning and policy piece. So options that we've seen in the past have been stormwater management plans. We have a few of those going in phase 3 with other communities right now. And then also updates to ordinances. Even here in Beaufort, they're incorporating resilience into their local ordinances. So those are things to consider as well. Next slide. So the deliverables for phase 3, as I mentioned, the deliverables for phase 3 engineering and design projects, these need to be fully designed essentially, so 90 to 100% complete if you're doing an infrastructure related project. So that makes them ready for submission to relevant permitting agencies, for example, here in our office, or DEQ stormwater, and it gets them ready to start moving through that process so everything's a little quicker, more fast-tracked. For ordinancy, planning, or policy projects, those are going to require a final draft document to be submitted. All projects must be completed in accordance with the deliverables outlined in the application, depending on what your project is. And a PDF document summarizing the work must be provided at the end of the contract period for our review. So whether it's a planning project or an engineering and design project that has an implementation component, if your project includes GIS data, and that's a big component, we do have some requirements on how to submit that data to us. So GIS data must be submitted as a map package, and there is some guidance in the RFAs about where to find more information on how to create map packages. But it includes a map document, and it's referenced data packaged into a single file. So that map package just makes it easy for us to see all the different data layers, and then we can kind of house that information and present it later on. Next slide. So in this case, DCM will be contracting directly with the selected applicants or the communities, and then the selected applicants will be responsible for conducting their own procurement process. So in this case, the money is going directly from DCM to the community, or well, the community will be requesting reimbursement from DCM for funds spent on doing the work. Next slide, please, Mackenzie. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that if you had not completed phases 1 and 2, but you wanted to use an equivalent scope of work, that we have a process for that. And in this application, that's called the Resilience Strategy Matrix. You'll see on the left-hand side of that page are the various steps required in phases 1 and 2. And then on the right-hand side, there's some space. What we're asking you to do here is to link or provide the documents that would fulfill these steps. So if you have a link available, you would just put it right there or indicate how you'll be sending those documents to us. And then once we have all of those filled out, our staff here at DCM will go through those to make sure that they fulfill the requirements of phases 1 and 2. And if they do, that would enable you to be eligible for phase 3 funding. So this is a document that's not required unless you are intending to bypass phases 1 and 2 with equivalent work, but that's included in your RFA. Next page, Mackenzie. So here are a couple other pages to take a look at. So the first is the project timeline. We understand that these timelines may change, so this doesn't need to be, a final product. We're just getting a sense of big milestones for your project over the course of the grant. So please fill this out as best you can. We're just looking for things like if we're doing progress reporting and we notice that, your schedule is getting off by a significant amount, it's easier to go ahead and start talking about the possibility of an extension at that point than waiting until we get to the end of the project. So this is just a general timeline for us to get an idea of what you're intending to do. And the second piece is the project budget for phase 3. We are asking that when submitting an application, go ahead and reach out to contractors and ask them to provide a cost estimate. And that way we can get an accurate estimate of what this funding is going to, how far this funding will go and what it'll be able to complete. So it's a fairly simplified budget, but just go ahead and put estimates in there and submit that as part of your final application. Next slide. So just a checklist here. Make sure to include the application cover sheet, which is included with the RFA. Your application question responses. We have heard that some folks have had a little bit of trouble with filling out the PDF documents, but you can just copy those questions over to a Word document if you like, if you have any trouble with the fillable forms, and just submit that alongside the cover sheet. And if there's supplemental documentation that you need to submit, please send that along as well, but keep that to 20 pages. And as I mentioned earlier, these documents just need to be sent to RCCP at deq.nc.gov by 5 p.m. on Friday, April 25th. Okay, we're moving along quick. I think we're ahead of schedule here, so we'll go ahead and knock out phase 4, and then we can get to answering all the questions that you guys might have. So again, I know it's repetitive, but this is going to be due at the same time since we're running all these concurrently. Hopefully, getting on this schedule will help in the future for folks to kind of be able to expect when these RFAs are going to come out, on a regular schedule. So this is largely going to be the same as phase 3 for the eligibility. So again, all county and municipal governments within the 20 CAMA counties are eligible to apply, as well as any federally or state recognized tribes. Again, adjacent communities can submit joint applications for regional grants. In this case, all eligible applicants must have completed phases 1, 2, and 3 of the RCCP, so they need to have those design plans ready, or an equivalent scope of work. Applicants may submit applications for more than one project, but again, please let us know what your funding priority would be. These are often really competitive processes, so if we have to be selective, we want to know what you would prefer us do. And so these are going to be eligible projects that have been identified and prioritized through the RCCP or a comparable process to that equivalent scope. To qualify, projects must be fully designed, engineered, and permitted or ready for permitting. In other words, shovel ready, and as close to possible to being prepared for construction to begin. Next slide. So this is a little different from phase 3. In this case, we're going to run a 16-month project period. So from June 2025 to October 2026, thereabout. Again, there's no cash match or in-kind match requirement. But the expected range for implementation projects, anywhere from $25,000 up to $1 million, depending on the project. And again, this is part of that $6 million that we've made available in total funding for phases 3 and 4. Next slide, please. So the selection criteria for phase 4. So of course, the applicant needs to have previously participated in phases 1, 2, and 3 of the RCCP, or have that equivalent scope. We want to know about the project's readiness, so ensuring that it has been designed and engineered. If there's any permitting roadblocks, we've identified those, and have a clear idea of how the project's going to be able to get rolling. We want to know about the project's contributions to the objectives of the RCCP, as well as the prioritization of the project within the applicant's project portfolio or similar planning documents. So if this was high priority for the town, we definitely want to know that, versus if it was more competitive with some other projects, we'd like to know the rationale behind some of that. So we'd like to know the extent to which the project incorporates nature-based components, as well as ensuring that the project has equal consideration for socially vulnerable, historically disadvantaged, and underserved populations. We want to know about its potential transferability to other coastal areas and municipalities, its cost effectiveness. And then again, just like phase 3, this is another time where we can take a look at its permissibility under the Coastal Area Management Act and look at any related regulatory requirements. So go ahead and look at what types of permits will be required. And if there's any anticipated problems, we can go ahead and start to address those, or get back in contact with you if we need to kind of relook at or review the application scope, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So the deliverables for phase 4, these should include but are not limited to these options, and these will vary a little bit depending on the type of project that you're completing, but deliverables should include a final report summarizing the objectives, implementation activities, and outcomes of your project. We'd like to see before and after documentation, such as photos, GIS data, or monitoring reports demonstrating the project's completion. We'll need the permits of any, we'll need copies of any permits, contracts, or other regulatory approvals that have been obtained, if applicable. Any public stakeholder engagement efforts, meeting summaries, or outreach materials should be submitted as well. So that can include things like fact sheets, workshop documentation. And then finally, if this is, for example, a project that maybe it's like a wetland restoration or something like that, if applicable, we would like to see a monitoring plan or a maintenance plan to ensure that that project is effective and successful long term. Next slide, please. So just like phase 3, DCM will be contracting directly with the selected applicants, and the selected applicants will be responsible for conducting their own procurement process. Next, yeah. Okay, so this is a little bit different from phase 3. So this is the budget sheet. There's a budget template posted on the RCCP website alongside the RFA for phase 4. So this is one piece that's going to be required to be submitted with the application. So it must include this budget estimate. And in addition, we'd like you to provide a copy of a bid or a project estimation from a contracting firm that outlines the cost of the project. Again, we just want to make sure that we're not coming in under budget on these projects, that we're getting a good estimate. So it's a pretty simple budget template, and it's just in Excel. You'll fill it out and then just submit that alongside your application. And if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to let us know. Next slide, Mackenzie. So again, just an application checklist. So we've got that cover sheet, the relevant questions, any supplemental documentation. Again, please limit that to 20 pages, as well as that budget sheet, which is a separate document that you'll have to download alongside the RFA. And again, this is all due to RCCP at deq.nc.gov on April 25th by 5 p.m. Next slide. And so just in summary, phases 3 and 4, again, applications due April 25th. Those should be emailed to that address, rccp@deq.nc.gov. We'll review those applications based on the criteria outlined here, as well as in the RFAs. We tried to be specific in this presentation with the material you've seen, because that's exactly what's in the RFAs as well. So you can return to this presentation or check out the RFAs to get any clarification you might need. Overall, the contract period will be about June 2025 to June 2026. But with phase 4, that's a little bit longer. Before we get rolling on applications, projects, once we've selected successful applications, we will be doing an in-depth orientation. So we'll keep you posted on that. And again, just wanted to reiterate that we're available to assist you in preparing your applications and answering any questions you might have. That's really what we're here for. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've got contact information on the next page. And I just want to say thank you all for your participation in this presentation and the RCCP as a whole. So if you do have any questions that we can't answer now, please feel free to reach out to us at our email addresses there, or give us a call. We're here to help. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kason. And I see we've got a message in the chat, or a question that I was about to respond to, but since we're all finished, I'll just go ahead and answer it here online. So it looks like it's a 2-part question. So first, is there a deadline for questions to DCM related to contractor RFAs? So there's no specific deadline except probably by April 25th, right, when applications are due. So anytime between now and April 25th, feel free to give us a call or an email with questions. We can set up a call, walk you through questions, any kind of supplemental documentation you have questions about, things like that. And then second, when and where will the addendum be posted for contractor RFA applications? I'm not sure if I'm following this question. I think you're saying, like, when will selections be made or the contracts be executed, maybe? So April 25th is the deadline. We're going to need about a month to go through and make selections. And then our process is we will contact the contractors that we're going to select to contract with. We'll contact you directly and give you an idea of which communities we would want you to work with. And then it's kind of like a mutual handshake where we're like, that sounds good to us. And then we'll start the contracting process with you. And that will require different contracting attachments and things like that. And then, yep, answered. Perfect. All right. Kason, you want to take this one? We've got one from Craig. What is meant by geographic scope?
So geographic scope for municipality, Craig, is this referencing kind of for a county focusing on a specific municipality, or are you wondering about like the geographic extent of a municipality and how that is determined or set? And I think, are they able to come off mute if they need to, Mackenzie, or is it just chat? Okay. Yeah, feel free to come off mute if you need to. Oh, mute is off but not working. Let's see. Well, while we're working on that, maybe Craig, if you wouldn't mind just giving me a little more context in the chat there, and perhaps we can get something going in preferences. We were unaware that folks were not able to switch off their microphone, and if anybody else has questions in the meantime, please feel free to keep dropping those in the chat, and we'll keep answering them as best we can.
In the meantime, it looks like there's another question. Oh, there we go. There's Craig.
Okay, geographic scope is specific to the city applying. Does our application have to be for a portion of the city, or can it be for the city? Yeah, so in the case of Wilmington, the application could be for the entire city. Yeah, no need to focus on a specific neighborhood or anything. So that kind of honing in on geographic scope is generally information that applies to county level applicants, where in the past, doing the resilience strategies and things and the vulnerability assessments for the county-wide has turned out to be just difficult to complete within the time frame, and there's some funding limitations. So that's why in recent times we've asked communities, or excuse me, counties to choose a focus area, like down east in Carteret County, for example, that they can kind of hone in on. Glad we answered your question though, Craig. Anybody else?
Sorry about the technical difficulties there, Craig.
Yeah, sorry about that, everybody.
Hi, Mackenzie and Kason. This is Montana. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes.
Yes, yeah, we can.
Hey, I just have a couple questions I'm hoping you guys can answer. Kason, I know that you mentioned that to apply for phase 4, communities have to have completed phases 1 through 3. So I do just want to confirm, if a community is currently in the midst of a phase 3 project, can they apply for a phase 4 grant this cycle, or do they need to wait until phase 3 is entirely complete?
So that's a good question, Montana. Do you know how far along they'd be from completing engineered site plans? So that might have to be like a case-by-case basis.
Okay, we might have to discuss offline then, because it's not going to be in time for the application. So is there a grace period following the application?
That's something that, yeah, we could discuss. How about we try to schedule a call and we can talk about that community or project.
Okay.
Because we don't want to, we don't want to discourage communities from not applying, but we also don't want to start a contract with them and then they can't start work for, 8 to 12 months.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That works. And I do just have another question. For phases 1 and 2, is there an expectation that consultants work with the community to submit the application for phase 3? Because I know this handbook does give the step-by-step instructions for how to work with the communities, or for what the communities can do. But is there that expectation that the consultants work with the community to submit the application for phase 3? Is there a defined scope task for consultants that state that they will help communities submit an application for phase 3?
No, there's not. But a lot of the consultants that have worked with communities in phases 1 and 2 have continued to, work with them to help for phases 3 and 4. So it's not like an obligation, but it is something that we see a lot of the time, as there's, kind of a lot of relationship building throughout the process. So it's certainly, I guess it kind of also is a little bit on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, Montana, it's not required in the scope of work. I think it's be up between, between you and the community. But the idea there is that the communities can do the phase 3 application on their own because the contractor did such an amazing job with the project portfolio that it's not a heavy lift, right? They can copy and paste a lot of the information into our grant application.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a few questions in the chat. The first one, Kate asks, how many communities will be accepted this round for phases 1 and 2? So we don't have a specific number set. Of the $2 million available for phase 1 and 2 and land use planning funding, about 1,500,000 is sort of set aside for phases 1 and 2 alone. And so if you break that down by kind of sort of like the average of our most recent round of funding, which is about $70,000 per community, that comes out to about 20. So it really will depend on how many applications we receive, and what kind of, as we kind of look at geographic extent and, the different kind of capacities of contractors and folks applying as well, those numbers could change a little bit, but, I would say somewhere around in that ballpark, 15, 20, something like that, but there's no like hard set limit that we have.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Thanks so much for explaining that.
Sure.
This is
Yeah,
Kate.
absolutely.
Hey, Kate, good to see you or
Hey,
hear from
good
you.
to see you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
was just
know.
going to add, there's like Kason did a great job answering that. There's no set number. To give some context, the very first round, we had 26 communities participate. And then this most recent round, there were 15. So I think that's why in the RFA, I think we mentioned maybe 20. That's like a ballpark number.
A ballpark, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives you some flexibility. That makes sense. Appreciate it. Great presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
joining.
Yep.
All right. Question from Jeannie. Hey, Jeannie.
Hi.
Let's see, are you planning lessons learned and successes? Oh, yes, yes, yes. We're constantly finding ways to improve this program and learn from the past. So we are actually working with Professor Dr. Miyuki Hino at UNC Chapel Hill right now. Her and a couple grad students are doing an external evaluation of our program, where they're kind of looking at all 4 phases, what's working, what's not, how we're building resilience. So that's simultaneously going on. But internally, Kason and I will also be continually kind of seeing where we need to make improvements. But in terms of like a presentation about that, we don't have one scheduled yet. We have been stretched a little thin, the two of us, but we are about to hire hopefully another specialist where we'd have a little more staff capacity to do something like that. Because I agree, it's very important to learn from each other.
Yeah, it's right there in your scoring criteria, which is excellent. It's like, how do you get it to the next level, right? So that everyone sees it and the ideas are like generated across, and it's just it's a great program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Craig, are letters of support from groups like Sierra Club River Watch valued? Wow, yes. I mean, you don't have to have them, but if you would like to submit that, that's totally up to you. But we don't, we're not going to like ding a community for not having letters of support. So if that's more work for you, Craig, I wouldn't worry about it.
Hey, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, I switched to a headset. I have a question. I'm glad I'm doing it. This will be my last question about you guys. I think it's all around the consultant side. I've been contacted by a few consultants, and they've been, not heavy-handed, just, can we help you out? We do this type of work and so forth. And, I'm thinking about if I were doing this at my home and I had contractors, I'd go check into references. I get other people to tell me how they did. Is there like a list of consultants that have successfully, completed phase 1, phase 2 projects that we could look at and just before I tack a name on there that this is one I'm interested in, I'd love to see if it was vetted by their experience?
That's a great question, Craig, and one we actually get a lot. So while we, as a state agency, can't say this is who we recommend, you can go to our website and we have all the final deliverables on there. So I would maybe do the most recent round. You could see the phase 1 and 2 deliverables, and they'll have the contractor that they worked with, that they'll have their stamp or whatever on there. So you can kind of see what the different deliverables look like. with the idea that we kind of want them to be consistent, right? But there is a little bit of difference between how some put together the information and the way some maps are made or things like that. If you have a particular idea of what you would want. And I also can just email you a list of who has participated in the RCCP as a contractor so far. But we don't like rank them.
Yeah, Mackenzie, don't worry about sending it. I'll just go through there and take a look at some of the projects and where they might line up with some of the things that we're looking at and
Yeah.
go through that. So thank you. That's a great source.
All right. How many contractors do you anticipate working with? That's another great question. So the most recent round, I believe we had 8 firms, and the very first round, maybe 9 to 10. So not more than 10. So that'd be a lot. But you never know. It also depends on how many firms apply. So if we only get 3 or 4 firms, we'll have to go from there. But probably looking anywhere between 8 to 10 firms. And it also depends on your capacity. If you can only help one community, that's fine. But then you'd have to bring in another firm if we have 20 communities wanting technical assistance.
Madeline, I saw your hand was raised. And
Yeah. Hey, Mackenzie and Kason. Another quick question. So for phase 1 and 2 application, y'all ask if there's a person in the community who has the capacity to be a leader on the community action team or land use plan committee. I just wanted to confirm that that person would be separate from like the local government lead, if that makes sense, or if that's the same.
That's a good question. So the most recent round, some of them were the local government person. So it'd be like you, Madeline, like being the lead champion person, which is fine. Or there were some communities where they, have that one person that's like at every meeting, every council meeting, out in the community, and they were the champion. So there's no requirement on who it is. If that helps answer your question.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yep.
I thought I saw another hand raised. Let's see here.
I've got a question sent to me. Can communities bring consultants with them or team together? I think there's been some differences throughout the program on whether the team could be a consultant and community, or if the community just gets a consultant from the pool. So that's a good question, Jonathan. So you still each would need to submit your own applications, if that makes sense. So let's say you want to work with the city of Wilmington. The city of Wilmington will need to submit their application, and then your firm would submit your application, and you both would note that you wanted to work together. And then we have done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of matching who wants to work with who. So that would be your team, if that makes sense. Let me know if it didn't come off mute.
Jonah, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you. For phase 1, I'm wondering how much the contractors can lean on or expect the communities to help lead the engagement efforts, recognizing that a lot of that work really does depend on local knowledge and can be quite time consuming. So in-kind staff hours are always helpful.
Yeah, I think so with the community action team, that's always an involved process, as far as we've seen thus far, with the communities providing feedback for kind of the best ways to get engaged in, those, whatever their unique circumstances are. Overall, as far as the contracting goes, it is the responsibility of the contractor to lead that community engagement process. But in most cases, we've seen, the community action team is heavily involved with that. But typically it's like the community action team will provide feedback on what types of community engagement are going to work best, what locations and times, events, that they know of have been the most successful at getting the community engaged. And then typically the contractor takes the lead on, making sure that time and space is reserved or whatever is needed in that case, and that the materials are present and they lead kind of the engagement as far as getting the word out and that sort of thing. But it's not, you know, it's not like a formalized reliance on, but you know, a lot of the time that kind of word of mouth or like materials that are produced by the contractor are shared by the CAT team. So it's a collaborative process in that sense, but the expectation is that the contractor lead the engagement efforts in that way.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Sure thing.
These have all been really good questions. Thank you guys. It helps us too. Is there anything else?
Hi, this is Lydia South. Can you go over about some of the phase 3 equivalent scoping? Because we just finished our land use plan and it's being reviewed by DCM now. And I think there's a lot of implementation that could be gleaned from that. And our community was kind of has some fatigue, interaction fatigue from people from asking for public input. So how can we go over that a little bit?
Hey, Maureen, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Are you able to get a little bit closer to your mic?
I'll try. Does that help? Is that better?
A little bit.
I don't know.
I think I got like half of your, I want to make sure I hear your whole question. I think something about you're getting your land use plan done right now.
Yes, it's being reviewed by DCM now.
Okay.
And I was wondering if we could go over like the equivalent scope for phase 3. Because I'm wondering.
Oh, because you think that you've hit the requirements for phases 1 and 2 through your camel land use plan?
Yes.
Okay, well that's something that we can talk about when we can go over the resilience strategy with you. So how about we schedule like a call, and we can kind of see, because there's a couple requirements in terms of like the resilience planning side that you need to have met for phase 3. But let me get do you have our emails? I was gonna say, or if you can put it in the chat, I'll follow up with you. We can set up a call. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Let me copy and paste that. All right. Any other questions? Or any, as our old deputy director used to say, any oh by the ways? Okay. Well, if not, they might come to you later, like me, later tonight. So don't hesitate to shoot us an email or call us. We're happy to help. That's what we're here for. And we're going to be putting a copy of the slides on the website, and I'll email them out to the registration list as well. And we're also going to have the recording up on the website. So if you've got staff that missed this, they can review it. And I really appreciate all of your time. This program is near and dear to Kason and I's heart. We're happy to be here and we're happy to help. And I hope you guys all have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you so much, Kason and Mackenzie.
Thank you.